Wednesday, September 26, Paul in Rome, finally. After 3 months in Malta, Paul and his companions were finally able to continue their journey. Acts 28:11 tells us that. They arrived in Puteoli, we find in Acts 28:13, which is modern Pozzuoli, in the Bay of Naples, from where they would travel to Rome by road. The whole story is in Acts 28, verses 11 to 16. After 3 months we put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. It was an Alexandrian ship with the figurehead of twin gods, Castor and Pollux. We put in at Syracuse and stayed there 3 days. From there we set sail and arrived at Rhegium. The next day the south wind came up, and on the following day we reached Puteoli. There we found some brothers and sisters who invited us to spend a week with them, and so we came to Rome. The brothers and sisters there had heard that we were coming, and they travelled as far as the Forum of Appius and the 3 taverns to meet us. At the sight of these people, Paul thanked God and was encouraged. When we got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. The news of Paul's approach quickly reached Rome, and from there a group of believers travelled several miles south to welcome him. Though he had never been to Rome, the apostle had numerous friends in the city, co-workers, converts, relatives, and many others who were very dear to him. We read about that in Romans 16, verses 3 to 16. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in Christ Jesus. They risked their lives for me. Not only I, but all the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them. Greet also the church that meets at their house. Greet my dear friend Epanetus, who was the first convert to Christ in the province of Asia. Greet Mary, who worked very hard for you. Greet Andronicus and Junia, my fellow Jews, who have been in prison with me. They are outstanding among the apostles, and they were in Christ before I was. Greet Ampliatus, my dear friend in the Lord. Greet Urbanus, our co-worker in Christ, and my dear friend Stachys. Greet Apelles, whose fidelity to Christ has stood the test. Greet those who belong to the household of Aristobulus. Greet Herodion, my fellow Jew. Greet those in the household of Narcissus, who are in the Lord. Greet Tryphena and Tryphosa, those women who work hard in the Lord. Greet my dear friend Persis, another woman who has worked very hard in the Lord. Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother, who has been a mother to me too. Greet Asyncritus, Phlegon, Hermes, Patrobas, Hermas, and the other brothers and sisters with them. Greet Philologus, Julia, Nereus and his sister, and Olympus, and all the Lord's people who are with them. Greet one another with a holy kiss. All the churches of Christ send greetings. The meeting on the Appian Way must have been particularly moving, especially in view of the shipwreck and the fact that Paul was now a prisoner. As a result of such a unique demonstration of love and care on the part of his beloved friends, the apostle thanked God and felt deeply heartened as he was about to face trial before the emperor. In his official report, Festus certainly must have written that, according to Roman law, Paul was not guilty of any significant crime, as we read in Acts 25, verses 26 and 27, and also in 26, verses 31 and 32. This probably explains why he was allowed to rent a private dwelling, as we read in Acts 28:30. For 2 whole years Paul stayed there in his own rented house and welcomed all who came to see him, instead of being sent to a regular prison or military camp, though after Roman fashion he was chained to a soldier the whole time. That Paul was at his own expense implies he was able to carry on his own trade, as we read in Acts 18:3, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Question. Read Acts 28, verses 17 through to 20. What did Paul do as soon as he settled down? Acts 28, begin at verse 17. 3 days later he called together the local Jewish leaders. When they had assembled, Paul said to them, "My brothers, although I have done nothing against our people or against the customs of our ancestors, I was arrested in Jerusalem and handed over to the Romans. They examined me and wanted to release me because I was not guilty of any crime deserving death. The Jews objected, so I was compelled to make an appeal to Caesar. I certainly did not intend to bring any charge against my own people. For this reason I have asked to see you and talk with you. It is because of the hope of Israel that I am bound with this chain." They replied, "We have not received any letters from Judea concerning you, and none of our people who have come from there has reported or said anything bad about you. But we want to hear what your views are, for we know that people everywhere are talking against this sect." Though Paul could not go to the synagogue could come to him. So, soon after his arrival, following his policy of going first to the Jews, as we read in Romans 1:16, he called together the local Jewish leaders to state his innocence and explain, as he had done before, that he had been arrested for no reason other than the hope of Israel. We read these texts in Acts 23:6, 24:15 and 26:6-8. So, first of all, Acts 23 verse 6. "Then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, 'My brothers, I am a Pharisee descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead.' And then Acts 24:15. "And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked." And Acts 26 verse 6-8. "And now it is because of my hope in what God has promised our ancestors that I am on trial today. This is the promise our 12 tribes are hoping to see fulfilled, as they earnestly serve God day and night. King Agrippa, it is because of this hope that these Jews are accusing me. Why should any of you consider it incredible that God raises the dead?" His intention was not so much to defend himself as to create an atmosphere of trust that allowed him to preach the gospel, showing how Jesus' resurrection was the fulfillment of Israel's ancestral hope. Surprised that they had not received any information from Jerusalem about Paul, the Jews decided to hear him. And so to finish today, read Acts 28:22. What does this tell us about the hostility against the believers still at that time? How can we stay faithful even when others are talking against our faith?